Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for being here tonight. I always appreciate it when people attend something that I'm presenting. I don't take that lightly or for granted. And so I hope you know that I am very, very thankful that you're here tonight. My name is Gabby, and I am a hospice nurse and an end-of-life doula. I work for Mission Hospice, who is graciously hosting this event tonight. And I am one of their hospice nurses, a part of a beautiful team. But as a doula, which is where I'm coming from tonight, I'm presenting you a class called Ritual and Ceremony, which is focusing on forgiveness of self and others. Tonight, because we only have an hour, I'm really going to focus mostly on others. And I want to read you a couple things. You'll hear me read some stuff that I've done research on, and a couple things that I suggest that you maybe write down as well, and just take notes if you want to. I'll have the candle and lighter ready so that you can participate in the ritual at the end. But I want to start by just telling you why I use rituals, how it got started, and what they mean to me. I think of rituals and ceremony, but mostly rituals, as sort of an intention setting opportunity to put something out into the universe in a way that comes back to you and brings you comfort and peace. For me, rituals are a huge part of what I do for our patients, for the patients' families, for people who are grieving, and for myself. I have been doing rituals for a very long time, way before I even became a nurse, not really realizing what it was. I kind of made it up at the time, but it's enhanced over time since I've become an end-of-life doula. I use them all the time. I'm going to start by telling you the first time I remember using a ritual. It was many years ago, 30 years ago, maybe. And my dad was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, which I probably said wrong, but it was at a time when that was not well known. He was one of the first patients at Davies Medical Center, and as they did a bunch of trials on him. And here is this very big, strong man whose hands and fingers closed up, and he was unable to do anything, couldn't even zip up his pants. And he was so strong. And I watched this disease just take him down. But my dad and I were not close, and he was not nice to me. He said hurtful things to me most of my life, most being things like, "You're stupid, you will never amount to anything, and you're worthless and useless and dumb." These words have sat in my head since I was a little girl. Over the years, as his illness took over, he moved in with his sister. He had a room. My sister's a nun. I mean, his sister is a nun, and they had a room in the convent area that they let him stay in. It was about an hour and a half from my house. And one Thanksgiving, he said to me, he called me up on the phone and said, "Is it all right if I come for Thanksgiving?" Which shocked me because we didn't have a close relationship, and we didn't spend a lot of time together. And so I was a little surprised, but of course I said yes. I drove the hour and a half and I picked him up. I brought him back to my home with my children and my family and my friends. And when it came to all of us sitting down prior to the meal, I asked everybody what they're most thankful for. And he said when it came to his turn, he said, "I'm thankful for my daughter." I know. He said, "I'm so proud of her and who she is and what she's done. She's such a good mother." I had been waiting to hear that for 20-something years. So this was very special to me, as you can imagine. The next day, I drove him home, and I knew that he was weaker. I knew that at the time, I had not had any experience in end of life or death, so I didn't know that he was dying. If I knew then what I know now, I would know that he was close. He was weaker. He was walking a little slower. He had canes and he was weak, but I had no idea. So I drove him all the way home. And as I got him into his little apartment, he said, "Can you stay for lunch?" And I said, "No, Dad, I'm sorry. I have other things that I need to do." And he said, "Please, can you stay for lunch?" And I said, again, "No, I'm sorry, Dad, I can't stay." So I drove back the hour and a half home and I had so much guilt. So I called him. We didn't have cell phones then. We didn't have computers. We didn't have any texting. So I called him on the landline. I left a voicemail for him and I said, "Hey, Dad," on his answering machine. You know how old that is now. I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm really sorry I wasn't able to stay for lunch, but I want you to know that I could come, this weekend and I'd love to have lunch with you." And he didn't answer the phone and he didn't call me back. So the next day I left another message saying, "Hey, Dad, if you want to have lunch this weekend, I'd be happy to come." I didn't hear back from him. And then the next day I left another message. Later that night, my aunt, his sister, called me up and said, "You need to come to the hospital. Your dad's been very sick and he's there and he doesn't have much time left." So, I've told this story so many times. I'm not sure why I'm crying so much now. Maybe it's because of why we're here tonight. So I went to the hospital. I sat 20 feet away from him against a wall on a bench. I didn't sit next to his bed. I didn't hold his hand. I didn't have the skills to do that. I didn't know. So I sat there, I watched him die, and I walked away that afternoon feeling so much regret and so much anger. And a few days later, my siblings and I went to his room and we cleaned things up. And the phone, his answering machine light was blinking. So I pushed play and I heard my messages. He had never gotten them. So that day, I went back home and I needed to work through this. Not going to lunch with him was a tiny little thing in the big scale of all the things that I had so much regret and anger for. I was angry at him, for my childhood or lack thereof, for the hurtful things that he'd said and done. And so I needed to do something to work through this. So I lit a tea light candle and I put it down on my coffee table and I sat on the floor next to it and I started to talk to him. I told him I was sorry I didn't make it for lunch. I forgave him for the hurtful things he said. I forgave myself for my reactions to them. And I just spoke to him. And I just said all the things I wished I had said all the years before, but also up to the point where I said no to lunch. And I told him that if I was given another opportunity, I would have said yes for sure. And I hoped that he knew that. And then I blew the candle out when I was done and I watched the smoke until it was gone. And I knew with every ounce of my being that he received the message. I needed that. That was before I was a nurse. That was before I was a doula. That was before I did any ritual or ceremony or even used those words. I started doing it more often after that. And when I had opportunities I was struggling and needed to release something, and it started to really help me. So I brought it into my work as well with patients and families, allowing people to say the things they needed to say, especially relative to grief. As a hospice nurse and an end-of-life doula, when I'm at the bedside, one of the things that I hear most often is about regret and guilt and hanging on to things for too long. You'll notice this too, and maybe you've seen it yourselves. When someone is about to die or someone is preparing to say goodbye, all of a sudden they're aware of all the things they didn't do and say, or all the things they wish they hadn't done or said, and all the time that was wasted. Life is incredibly fragile, and we learn that when you work in this field especially. But when someone you love has died, you're made very, very aware of just how much time you have wasted. I do a lot of rituals with the people who are feeling great grief and regret and guilt and all the things, so that when they take that last breath, they don't take that with them. And for the people who are grieving and haven't perhaps had a chance to say all the things, or maybe they didn't get to say goodbye, right? During COVID, I did that a lot with family members who I was at the bedside of someone they love. I was holding their hand. I was putting phones up to their ears. But because of COVID, their own family members weren't allowed to be there, which meant they didn't have a chance to say goodbye. I personally feel like we did that wrong. We should have found a way to let them be at their bedside, especially if I was allowed to. We could have put PPE on them, right? We could have covered them up. We could have put gloves on their hands. So there's a lot of guilt and regret and unfinished business for so many people, especially grievers. So I helped them with rituals to say goodbye or to send messages. And that's eased some pain, that's eased some sadness and sorrow, and it's given them permission to feel whatever they need to, but to also release some of the things that have been hurting them. I'm going to read something. This is a quote. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the harm done to you or making up with the person, or making up with the person who caused the harm. Forgiveness brings a kind of peace that helps you go on with life. You know, I think people think that when you extend forgiveness, you're condoning behavior. I don't see it that way. I see it as I am offering forgiveness of the weight that I've been carrying on your behalf. When I offer forgiveness, it doesn't say I condone you for the hurt you've caused me. It's me saying, I'm not taking this weight anymore. It's not mine to carry. And I let it go. Because from my experience in my job, I realize how fragile and precious life is, of course. But I don't want to die with regret. I don't want to have so much anger and guilt and heaviness that I take that with me. It blocks my view. It's heavy. I don't want to die with that. It's not my weight to carry. I did a little research, some Mayo Clinic stuff, some Google stuff, and I found a couple of things that define forgiveness to me. So I'm going to read them to you. Psychologists generally define forgiveness as a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward a person or group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness. Just as important as defining what forgiveness is, though, is understanding what forgiveness is not. And I want you to hear this part especially. Experts who study or teach forgiveness make clear that when you forgive, you do not gloss over or deny the seriousness of an offense against you. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean condoning or excusing offenses. Though forgiveness can help repair a damaged relationship, it doesn't obligate you to reconcile with the person who harmed you or release them from legal accountability. I won't go into this today, but in my I teach a course, the one, it's actually a 2-hour forgiveness course. And in that, I share some of my past history, which I will not do today, but I have a lot of things that happened to me as a child. I was not cared for well. I was not treated well. I carried that with me as well in my lifetime. And when you take all of that with you, it kind of sets a pattern on how you treat yourself and how you let others treat you as well. It took me a long time, 50 years, to be able to realize that, wait a minute, I am not their bad behavior. I am not their unkind words. I am not their physical or verbal abuse or violence. I am good and kind, and I deserve that. But I didn't treat myself that way. And so what I had to learn was to forgive all of that, to let it go and not allow it to take my hand and walk me through my life. I can do that on my own. It takes work. It's not going to happen right this second. One of the things that if you've heard me talk before, you've heard me talk about the coat of many pockets, right? I imagine myself, not anymore because my pockets are a lot less, but I imagine myself in this sort of floor-length trench coat filled with pockets. And each pocket is filled with mud, and that mud represents all the negative stuff that was in my life, all of it. And through my lifetime, I have learned to walk with the muddy coat, splashing mud everywhere I go, right? I'm so messy. I've been messy, I'll admit it. And even though I'm smart, despite what my father said, I knew I could take that coat off, but I never did. Instead, I learned how to walk through my life with that coat on, splashing mud on everyone that came near me. Over the years, I've been emptying out the mud. I'm kind of comfortable with the jacket right now. I'm not quite ready to take it off because I'm so familiar with it, but the pockets are almost all empty now. But that's what we do. We take all of our history, all of our past, all of the things that people have said and done, and even the things that we have said and done, and we carry it with us, and it gets in our way, and it affects how we treat ourselves and others. One of the things that I've been doing recently is volunteering my time with the Humane Prison Hospice Project. I'm one of the facilitators where I am educating incarcerated men and women how to provide hospice care to other inmates who are dying. It's absolutely beautiful, and it has filled my soul in so many ways. But one of the incarcerated men said to me one day, he was telling me about his son. He has a young son. He's going to be in prison until he dies. He's been there since he was in his 20s. He's now 60 something. His son is very proud of him for the work he's doing. He's providing end of life care to his other fellow inmates who are dying, and he's doing it so beautifully. And his son is proud of him. And he's so glad that that's what his son sees him for, right? The work that he's doing now, not what he did in his past. And he said to me, imagine if every person you met only saw you for the mistakes you made. Now think about that for a minute. Think of the things you've said and done. I mean, I do it all the time. But I imagine myself sitting next to the bed, providing beautiful care to someone who's dying and comforting someone who's saying goodbye. And I wonder, would they be as comforted by me if they knew some of the things that I've said and done, or the things that I've been through? I want people to see me for who I am now, my growth, the way that I've evolved, the things that I have learned. And I think that's important. I think we have to see ourselves that way first in order for others to as well. We have to empty the mud. We have to learn to let things go. And we have to be able to walk forward tall and strong and say, yeah, I've been through some stuff, but look at me now. One of the things that I've learned as I've emptied out my muddy pockets is that the weight is lighter. I am healthier mentally, physically, emotionally, even spiritually. When you carry all this anger, when you carry bitterness with you, when you walk through life with that weight, your health can be affected. Mine was affected. If you let go, if you can learn to forgive yourself and those around you, you can have healthier relationships, improved mental health, less anxiety, stress, and hostility towards yourself and to others, lower blood pressure, fewer symptoms of depression, a stronger immune system, improved heart health, and improved self-esteem. When I look back at who I was even 10 years ago, I looked in the mirror and what I saw was baggage. What I saw was a victim. What I saw was a person that wasn't beautiful or lovable. And I imagine that there's somebody else in this group that feels the same or has. I don't see that person anymore because I'm not going to allow that. I've created this sort of seven steps to forgiveness, some of which I found on the internet, so you can probably find it there as well. And I would advise you to write down the step itself. You don't need to write everything I say, because if you do, you'll kind of not be able to hear the other things. So let's start with number one, the step to forgiveness. Acknowledge. Acknowledge the hurt, who hurt you, and why they did it. What is the context of the situation and how long ago did this happen? Time is important. Did it happen yesterday? Did it happen 6 months ago? Or did it happen 27 years ago? If it happened 27 years ago, I think it's time to let that go. And step number two is to consider. Consider how the hurt and pain has affected you. The word consider is key here because it involves thinking before making a decision. Before you decide on whether or not you will forgive this person, consider the negative feelings you've acquired since this incident. How has the pain changed you? How detrimental was this person's mistake to your life or someone else's? Step three is to accept. Accept that you cannot change the past. No matter how much you wish this pain could be reversed, it's time to admit to yourself that your anger towards this person won't redeem what they have done. It is during this step that you must thoughtfully consider whether or not you actually want to forgive. Step four is to determine. Determine whether or not you will forgive. This is when the forgiveness process will either begin or it will end. This decision should not be made lightly, as it will determine the future of your relationship with this person. Step 5 is to repair or let go. This is my most important one. Do you want to repair the relationship with the person who wronged you? Can you rebuild the connection you used to have with this person? In most cases, you will be the instigator of this repairing, but if you have thoughtfully engaged in the previous 4 steps, then there is a higher chance of success. Note that you are repairing the relationship, not restoring it. It will likely take more time for the relationship to return to normal, whatever that might look like for you. Acts of repairing can include kind words, simple gestures, and even gifts. But if you choose to let go, you must make peace with that. Step 6 is to learn. Learn what forgiveness means to you. Up until now, you've probably thought that forgiveness is more for their benefit, not yours. But once the relationship is on the path to restoration, however that plays out for you, and you've given yourself time to accept the reality of the past, it's clear that forgiveness is a way for you to find closure that means something. Step 7, forgive. Forgive the person who wronged you. In some cases, this will be silent. You may be compelled to verbally forgive that person, even if you do not expect a kind response. But if you have followed through on the previous steps, then their reaction won't really matter. What will matter is that you have found a way to let go and move on. About 10 years ago, my brother was dating a woman who none of us liked anyway, but he was dating her, and I made every attempt to be nice and to have some sort of relationship. My brother and my little sister and I were very close. Our children were very close. This woman's name is Jenny. Jenny she didn't like our closeness. She's very vindictive, not a very kind person. She didn't like how close we all were, so she wanted to disrupt that. She first tried to get me against my sister, which wasn't going to work. I wouldn't allow that. So she decided that she could turn my sister against me. She told my sister that she called this meeting with her and her husband. I, of course, was not there, and my brother was there. They called this meeting, and she told them that I had said some things that insinuated that they had an inappropriate relationship with their son, my nephew. I never said anything like that. But my brother, wanting to please his girlfriend, said to my sister, I heard her say that. This tore all of us apart. They all separated from me and my children. So my brother and sister and his new girlfriend carried on a life of their own for many years. No longer a part of mine, no longer a part of my children. It broke me. And it was all over a lie. After a few years, it turned out that she turned into exactly who I thought she was. They broke up. My brother told my sister that actually he had not heard me say that. So my sister came to me. We sort of made amends. We tried to have a relationship. Both my brother and sister moved to Idaho, so I didn't see them again for a very long time. My sister and I sort of talked, but my brother and I didn't. For 3 years after that, my brother and I only exchanged texts on birthdays and holidays. Well, 2 years ago, January, I got a call that my brother was airlifted to a hospital in Montana and was dying. I flew to Montana. I hadn't talked to him in a very long time. And I sat at his bedside for 18 days. Excuse me. For those 18 days, I forgave him. I told him that when he gets better, we're going to let this go and we're going to do better. And we're never going to let anybody come between us again. I accepted his unsaid apologies. He was on a ventilator. He couldn't talk, but I knew somehow that we were communicating. I apologized. I offered forgiveness. I extended forgiveness. I accepted forgiveness. And I just kept saying, I'm sorry. He woke up 2 days before he died. They took him off the ventilator. They took him off the oxygen. He even had a couple bites of applesauce. And I said, Ben, did you hear me? And he said, I'm sorry too. He didn't say that because he thought he was going to die. He said it because he thought he was going to live. But we wasted almost 10 years being angry about a lie, about things that we couldn't fix. We couldn't make it better. It happened. Why didn't we let it go? Why couldn't we put what mattered most, which was a family bond, right? But when he died, I got to take that with me. I'm sorry too. And I know that he heard me say it too, so I know he took that with him as well. But what if we didn't waste time? What if we all, and I'm guilty of it too, what if we all didn't hold on to these grudges? Now, some relationships can't be repaired. I'm not saying we would have miraculously had this great relationship, but what if we had all let it go? What if instead of spending 18 days apologizing, instead I just rehashed memories or did things that were a little more productive or a little bit more comforting? I was so wrapped up in my own anger and guilt and regret, knowing he probably was as well, that was my focus. I think we all are guilty of that. We hold on to things so tightly that we don't know how to let go. We only know that tightness, that grip. So what I want to encourage you guys to do is maybe write things down, right? Like not right this moment, of course, but maybe after we finish today, write down 5 things that you have held on to. 5 things that are just wasting space, that you can't fix, that you can't do over. And then at that time, you decide on step number 5. Do I repair or let it go? You might not have that option. I don't have that option. I don't have it with my parents. I don't have it with my brother. So I have to make peace with that within. So this is that time where you think, do I want to repair or let it go? You can do that. You can repair, you can let it go. Or do you want to fix things, make them better? If you do that, then you have to accept whatever is going to be said to you, because you think that you've decided, okay, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to say all this stuff and it's going to miraculously get better. It doesn't work that way, because they're going to have some stuff to say too, especially if you might have been the one causing the distress. We have to make peace when we decide to do this, to accept what the other says and take it in, accept it. If we're choosing to repair. Now, if you're choosing to let go and move on, make peace with that. Let it go. And don't fill your pockets with more unnecessary mud. There's this exercise that I do. It's from this book called the Tao or Tao Mind of, it's a mind exercise. And I'm not going to do the whole one here because it would take too long, but I'm going to give you a visual of it because it's a good practice for you to do at home. You can do this out in your backyard, you could do it in your front yard, or you could do it in your living room, which is what I do. You start at one point. I start at my front door, and then I walk across the room to the wall. And I have something heavy. In my case, it's my Joy of Cooking cookbook, because if any of you have a Joy of Cooking cookbook, you know how heavy that is, right? So if that doesn't work, get a brick or whatever you want. It doesn't matter, as long as it's heavy, okay? You start at the one side of the wall. You have this heavy object and you walk across the room to the other side and you turn around and you walk back. You do it 3 or 4 times, carrying this heavy object. And then you put it down and you do that same walking. You feel the difference, right? It's a little lighter. It's not as heavy to carry. So then once you've done that, you stop for a minute, you bend over, you pick up the heavy item, feel it, and you put it down and feel that. To visually and physically feel the weight of what you're carrying will let you know just how heavy it is. The idea is to appreciate what it feels like when the weight is less. And this is a great exercise. You can do it anywhere. You could do it anytime. You could do it when you're trying to walk through whatever situation you're going through, right? Imagine you had a fight with your coworker or a partner, or maybe things are kind of crazy at work or whatever's going on. do that little exercise and figure out if it's worth carrying the weight. Maybe you could do that with the things in your pocket, one at a time. Don't be an overachiever. You're not going to get all your pockets emptied in one walk across the room with your Joy of Cooking cookbook. It's just not going to happen. But it could happen after months of doing that. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. Rituals for me are any opportunity that allows me to sit with whatever I am working through, acknowledge it, look at it for what it truly is, see the weight of it, let it out, and release it. Candles for me are important. That's what I use a lot of. And I have a couple things that go with that. One is that I use the same candle every time. Now, this is about my 16th candle, okay? I use the same candle for every ritual until it's burnt all the way down. I do a ritual to say goodbye to the candle once it's all the way down, right? And I thank it for being there for me. And then I throw it away and I start with a new candle. But I always use the same candle until that candle can't be used, because in my head, I think that every time I light the candle, it's reigniting the things that I set before it. Ritual can be things that you do at the end of each day, things that you say to yourself, things that you do when you need to release something. A ritual is a consistency. It's an intention. For me, it's usually about release. I have another ritual that I do. And this is, you might have, if you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard me bring this up, but I'm going to bring it again because I think this really is helpful. Every night I ask myself 3 questions. The first question is, what did I do well today? I believe that when you ask yourself that and you acknowledge the things you do well, you're giving yourself credit which you deserve. But it doesn't mean like I got an A on a paper or, like baked a really good cherry pie. Although those can be if that's what you did well that day. But what if you did well was I spoke up. I didn't let somebody take advantage of me. I took ownership of something. Now, sometimes my do things well might just be that I really practice effective listening. Listening to another person is such a gift. You don't have to answer, you don't have to fix, you could just acknowledge, right? And just let them know that they've been heard and validate their words. What if we just all did that well? What if that was our commonality, that we all listened better? Imagine what a difference this world would be, right? So you ask yourself, what did I do well today? Give yourself credit for that. Now, my second question is, what could I do differently? Not better, differently. Could I have practiced a little more patience? Could I have maybe said something differently? Could I have maybe been less harsh? Could I have been a little less selfish? Could I have been a little more grateful? Anything. What could I have done differently today? We know there's things that we could do differently. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But you need to acknowledge that as well. Because your third question is, what did I learn? If you can learn from that, then that finishes your day. You can let that go. I'll give you an example. I had I was walking down the hallway of my office. This is about 2 or 3 years ago, and a coworker came up and she kind of attacked me a little bit, not intentionally, but she was a little aggressive with her words, and I was frustrated. I was already dealing with something else, and I kind of snapped at her. I took what I was feeling out on her. And I walked away and I could feel her energy. She was a little shocked by what I said. And then I walked away and I stopped for a moment and I thought, she didn't deserve that. So I turned around and I walked back. I'm really proud of myself for doing it that day. But I turned around, I walked back and I said, you know what, I'm so sorry I said that to you. You didn't deserve that. I'm having a bad day. What you said kind of set me off, but I could have handled that so much better. And I'm really sorry. I'm very proud of myself that I did that day. I don't usually do that. I tend to let it simmer for a while, like days sometimes. So I'm using that as an example. What could I have done differently? I could have reined it in a little bit. I could have held that back. I could have taken a deep breath first before responding to her. I could have said, you know what, I'm just not in the space right now. And that would have been so much better than just reacting, which we're all capable of. I'm only human. I'm not saying I'm a failure because I have reactions. What I'm saying is that I have to be aware of them. So at the end of the day, if you ask yourself these three questions, then you're giving yourself permission to let it go so that you don't start your next day with that weight, that guilt. You know, I felt guilty that I said that to her, that I reacted that way. So when you do this, it allows you to put some closure on the day and start your next day with a little bit less weight, less mud in your pockets. Because if you don't, your pockets just get full. You're going to have more mud. You're going to splash more places, and you're going to be even more messy than you already are. Now, I'm not saying you're messy. I'm just speaking for myself. I'm messy. So one of the things that I want to do today is I want to offer you a ritual that I do often, and this is forgiveness of others. So before we start this, I'm going to ask that you, if you have a pen and paper, I hope you do, or maybe you just close your eyes and just do some deep thought. I want you to write the name down of someone that you want to offer forgiveness to. Okay. It could be someone from your past. It could be someone from this morning. It could be someone from 27 years ago. Write their name or names, at most 3. Don't try to overdo it today. Write their name, and next to their name, what are you forgiving them for? I'm going to give you about a minute or 2 to do that. So what you're doing is you're writing the names, 1 or 3, and next to their name is what you want to forgive them for. It could be something they did, something they said. And remember, this is for you. No one ever has to see this. No one ever has to know. So be completely honest with yourself and whatever it is that you put on this paper. And once you're done, put your pen and paper down and sit in a comfortable position. Take your shoes off, relax. Make sure that your candle and lighter are close by. Don't light them yet. But I want you to really feel comfortable. I don't want you to feel like you're having to sit up straight. If you want to slouch, slouch. Let your shoulders drop and just breathe. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in, holding it for a moment. And when you release it out hard and fast, and just let some of that weight go. Keep your eyes closed. Over your lifetime, someone has said or done something that has caused you pain or sadness. We cannot go back in time to change things. We cannot reverse what was said or done, but we can move forward just a little bit lighter, learning to stop carrying their weight with us. Their behavior, their meanness, their anger, their violence, their abuse is on them. This is about them. This is not about you. They do not have the power anymore to leave us carrying all of their weight. And place your hand on your heart, feeling your breath, feeling your chest rise and lower. Allow your breath just to slow down a bit. And I want you to repeat these next words. I am not their words. I am not their behavior. I am not their abuse. Take a deep breath in. Hold it for a moment. And let it out hard and fast. Release that weight. Now repeat these words out loud. You cannot hurt me anymore. I am letting the pain go. I am not taking it with me anymore. Now, when you're ready, open your eyes and light your candle. And for those of you who don't have a candle, consider mine lit for you. Place the candle back down on the table and close your eyes. And with your eyes closed, just breathe. I want you to picture the person or people that you wrote on your list earlier, the people that you want to send forgiveness to. And by forgive, I simply mean to let go of what you are carrying that was caused by them. Tell them that you are letting it go. You might also be letting them go as well. Do that now. You can say it quietly to yourself. You can say it out loud. Whatever it is you need to do. Tell them you are letting it go, that you are offering forgiveness. And if you are letting them go as well, say goodbye. When you hold resentment toward another, you are bound to that person or condition by an emotional link that is stronger than steel. Forgiveness is the only way to dissolve that link and get free. Now, as you picture this person or people that you have added to the list, picture them clearly, see them there, and feel in your heart the forgiveness that you're extending, the release of the weight that you've been carrying. Now go ahead and open your eyes. Have your candle ready. And repeat after me. You cannot hurt me anymore. You cannot hurt me anymore. I am not carrying this weight with me anymore. And when you blow out the candle, I want you to say these words. I release you. And follow the smoke until it's gone. I release you. If you've written the names on a piece of paper, I invite you to, after we're done today, to take them to the sink, and I say the sink because there's water there, and set it on fire and burn it. You don't need to throw it in your trash. You don't need to save it for later as a reminder. You already know, but let it go. Let anything that you wrote down or thought about in this session, and let it go. It's just not worth it. We are gifted life, right? And we make mistakes, and other people make mistakes, but we only get this one time. And I think that it could be better. I think that it could be with a little more peace, ease, and grace if we stopped carrying this stuff with us. And I can only speak from experience because I've worked so hard to do it myself. Life is a lot different when you stop sitting under this dark cloud of the past. That cloud has been everywhere with me for 50 years. It's not with me anymore. I'm not responsible for what other people say and do. And there's been a lot, unfortunately. I am only responsible for what I say and do. And that's all I can control. That's all you can control. So as we finish this session, this moment, this time together, I want to read to you a poem that I wrote. It's called That Final Bow. What if we did things differently? What if we didn't waste so much time? What a difference it could make in your life. What a difference it could make in mine. I think about this often, the things I wish I had said or done, wishing I had spent a little more time savoring life, laughing and having far more fun. These are the things that I hear when I'm sitting next to the bed from a patient who is dying. These are the thoughts that spin around their head. What if and I wish are the things they often say, wishing for more moments and more time, wishing for just one more day. Time takes on a whole new meaning when you haven't much left to spare, such as time with friends and families and all the love that you still have left to share. If we could learn something from them, if we could start making changes now, perhaps we would have less regret when we take our final bow. Like I said earlier, one of the things that I see most frequently at the bedside is regret. No one ever says, I'm so glad I worked so much. No one, not one person has ever said that to me. But a lot of times what I hear is disconnect with family members or friendships or relationships, and the angry things that were said back and forth. And you know what? That happens. I've done it too. You've probably done it as well. And we can't take it back, but we can let it go. So what I'd like to invite you to start doing is imagining your coat, right? How many pockets are in it? How many have mud in them? What is the longest standing pocket, the one that has been on you for the longest period of time? Maybe start there. And I can speak to you from experience when I say that a lot of things happen to us when we're children. A lot of things that shouldn't have happened. They happened to me, so I can appreciate what that feels like. But that isn't who you are. That's what happened to you. And I'm not saying that it's easy to forget it, but if you can forgive it, if you can let the weight go, then maybe it won't be so heavy for you anymore. Maybe you can see the light. I'm going to kind of give you an example of what life feels like for me. I feel like I've had this giant window in front of me, right? And it's been covered with mud most of my life. And in some places, you know, after a stormy day, some of the mud kind of got washed away and I was able to see through the cracks. I can see outside, I can see sunlight, I could see rainbows, but only little teeny bits of them. And for some reason, I felt like I had to sit behind the dirty window. So I never thought to clean it. Well, over the last, I'd say 10 years, maybe less, I've been slowly cleaning that window. And I do see rainbows. And I do see brightness. And I do see better days. I see tough times too. I'm not going to romanticize this, that life is suddenly going to be better if you just magically wash your windows. I'm just saying that you can. And in a time of grief, Some of you are grieving. I'm grieving. I know what that feels like. We don't give ourselves permission to feel joy. I think we need to give ourselves permission to feel joy. And you could start small. Step outside tomorrow morning and look at the clouds. Have you ever compared the clouds from day to day? 5 days, 1 day, second day, third day, fifth day. Clouds are amazing, right? And they're kind of gorgeous. What if you just start there? I want you to give yourself permission to find joy in each day, even in the tiniest amounts, and to forgive yourself and to forgive others in such a way that it empties out your pockets. Before we say goodbye, I want to give you one more ritual. I make a lot of mandalas. I do it for many reasons. Mandalas has kind of become my thing. And what I do is I invite families, especially during grief, to go out for a walk. You could take walk for 7 days. You could do it all in 1 day. And you go to the forest or you go to the beach or you go to your neighbors' yards. Don't steal anything from your neighbors, though. That's not nice. But you could even do it from your living room if you don't want to leave your house. That's okay too. And you start collecting things. I'll collect shells and rocks and flowers and little pieces of tree and moss and feathers sometimes if I'm lucky enough, right? And any flower that's dropped on the ground, I take the petals. And I collect all these things. And while I'm doing this, I contemplate life, right? Just what I'm doing, how I'm feeling, where I'm going, where I've been. And I collect all these things. I never pick anything that's alive. And if there's, say, 3 feathers on the ground, I only take 1. Don't be greedy. And I take them. Sometimes I'll do it while I'm in the forest. Sometimes I'll do it on the beach. Sometimes I'll bring it home and do it in my yard. And I sit with it for a moment and I make a design, something beautiful out of whatever I've collected. And I spend that time thinking about just everything. And I leave it there. And it's especially beautiful when you can leave it in the forest or the ocean or the beach, because then people can see it when they walk by. But if you leave it in your front yard where you can see it every day, what's really beautiful is to allow it to just sit there while the weather does its thing, right? It could be a rainy day, it could be a sunny day, there could be some wind, and you watch as the mandala just slowly sort of changes its shape, right? Because of the elements in the air. And you realize that even though it's been moved around a little bit, it's still beautiful. Even though there's a little disarray, even if it's a little less organized and in this perfectly circular shape, it's still beautiful. And even as the flowers wilt and the leaves crumble, the colors are still vibrant and beautiful. We are okay. And we're still beautiful. And I want you to see that. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that more than you know.